And Steve, if you'll go to that tight shot here, and we'll show why a brokered convention can't happen. Okay, these are numbers from the Rasmussen poll, and the latest number is from, as you can see, today, the 14th. And it shows Giuliani with 11%, Huckabee with 20%, Thompson with 12%, Romney with 13%, McCain with 23%. This all bodes very well for our efforts because, as usual, they leave Ron Paul off. There's no big deal there. But I added up all these percentages, and if memory serves me, I think it added up to 79%. So there's 21% out there that possibly, Ron Paul's got a good chunk of that. And basically, I'm kind of believing what these mainstream polls are putting out there. I'd like to blow smoke up your skirt and tell you, oh, no, Ron Paul won New Hampshire. But I really can't tell you that. I mean, we even had a Patriot broadcaster, Catherine Albrecht. Catherine Albrecht from SpyChips.com was doing a show from New Hampshire at a poll. She was up there at a poll, and she first went to a neighborhood in New Hampshire that was that they expected to be pro-McCain, and she said indeed that the reactions from most of the people going into that poll were negative towards her and her cohorts holding up Ron Paul signs and wearing T-shirts, etc. And I can tell you from firsthand experience up at the Texas straw poll, I can tell you from the Texas straw poll, when Terry Melton and I were sitting at the exit door of the polling, is you could tell who was with you and who wasn't by their body language, their reaction, their faces. If they, gave you a thumbs up, if they smiled at you, yeah, Ron Paul, they're going to be pretty upfront about you. They're not going to be secretive and all that. Don Zimmerman, thank you for coming down on a Monday night. This man has just been incredible for now almost a year. Hard at it, just incredibly hard at it here in Austin. And Don, what we're going to talk about is the possibility of brokered convention. So let's rewind it right here to where do we start on our way? Because this is a process. So if you will just start us from the beginning.
Well, we've actually started here in Austin. We started back in the summer with the November 6th constitutional amendment election. So we've been training and preparing people since the summer. And we've had some pretty good results. If you want to go back to how the Republicans pick delegates and how this works. So I got started in the Republican Party state conventions in 1996. That was my first year, and I've been to every convention. They happen every 2 years. I've been to every state convention since 1996 as either a delegate or an alternate. So I've been through 3 cycles now of electing national delegates from the state, from Texas. And the way it works is when you get to the state convention, you have a congressional caucus. So delegates, national delegates are picked in Texas. It's different in different states. But in Texas, you pick your delegates by congressional district. And the state delegates who come from the counties around the congressional district, they caucus together. And they elect 3 delegates to the national convention from each congressional district.
Well, let's back up a little bit, though, and let's talk about how that to even be in the running for delegate, the first thing you got to do is, we got to canvass our neighborhoods and then get people out of our neighborhoods to these precinct conventions. So tell us about how that process works of the precinct convention.
Okay, so the delegate process is like a large funnel, and you start with many, many thousands of delegates, and they start at your local level at your precinct. So to be a national delegate, you generally start in your neighborhood, in your precinct. You got this giant funnel, and as you go from your precinct convention, which happens on March 4th.
Here in Texas.
Here in Texas, you have some delegates elected.
We are going to be putting this on YouTube, so if you're not in Texas, you need to check the specifics for your state.
Correct. It's different in different states. We're talking about Texas here, and I've only been through this in the state of Texas. Okay. So, and I believe the state of Texas has some of the more people-friendly rules. I mean, the delegates and voters here in Texas have more control over the delegate process than in many states. In many states, delegates are elected by top party officials or elected. No, we don't want that. So we actually have a pretty good system here.
That's good.
Where the local delegates from the local precinct get elected to what's called a senatorial district convention or a county convention. And that happens on March 29th. So we're going to have our first round of conventions on March 4th after the polls close at 7:30 or 8 at night. out of that will come some delegates that go to a senatorial district or a county convention. That happens March 29th. And at that convention, there'll be a selection process for delegates to the state convention, which is going to happen in June, in early June.
Okay.
And then once you get to the state convention, then all of those delegates that have made it that far, we've gone through the funnel here, and we're down to about 3 steps. So the final step for national delegates is that the state delegates meet by congressional district, and they decide who's going to go to the national convention. And there will be 3 delegates from each congressional district. So if you do the math, I believe we have 32 congressional districts in Texas.
Okay.
So we're talking about 96 delegates that are being selected.
Okay, and I think the total for the state of Texas is 100. Let's see, 138.
Correct.
Is the number of delegates.
So there are some at-large delegates.
Okay,
that
at-large
are not,
delegates.
Yeah, at-large that are not picked from the congressional district.
Okay.
And those at-large delegates there are some ex officio positions, like if you're a senator or a congressman, you automatically are entitled to go as a delegate. The chairman of the Texas Republican Party, she gets to go
Right.
as an official. Yeah, so they don't have to go through the funnel like the rest of us.
So it's kind of like in NASCAR, where when you got the champion of, let's say, this year or last year, 2007, you got the NASCAR champion. He automatically gets qualified in all the races next year without even, even if he qualifies poorly in time-wise. That's what you got, is some people like that have this superpower almost to be a delegate. So that makes it even more important that we as the grassroots go out there and take over the Republican machinery. And I mean, in theory, if we had, say, 10 or 20 Ron Paul hardcore activists in each voting precinct in Texas, and they showed up at these precinct conventions, then most of the delegates at the state convention would be Ron Paul people, right? In theory.
In theory.
Right.
In practice, it's quite different. In practice, you have people that have been holding these conventions for decades sometimes. And there are many, many rules that are involved, and there's quite a bit of power involved in committees of the various conventions at the senatorial district and the state level. So there are committees that have a lot to do with kind of setting rules, and it's very easy for what we call establishment GOP players to stack the deck.
Right.
And one of the important things that we haven't really talked about yet, because we've got to get through the March 4th precinct conventions, that's where we have the most influence. The local neighborhood really does control and run that meeting.
Right.
But once you get past the precinct convention and you start going higher in the process, it becomes much more complex, and the players that have been in this for 10, 20 years, they have significant advantage.
Well, it's just like everything we do. I mean, we're doing it the hard way, folks. We're going up against the establishment. But still, nonetheless, Don, if we go, let's say in Travis County, I think there's 220 some odd or 240 some odd precincts in Travis County. If those were all represented by, say, 10 Ron Paul Republican delegates to the convention, precinct convention, then out of that senatorial district, all we're going to send to the next level are going to be Ron Paul people. If that happened all over statewide, they would only have us to work with, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Potentially. Okay.
Yeah, potentially.
So that's the theory, and ultimately, if that occurred in every state, that we got out there and had that kind of representation in every state, then guess what happens when we get to that national convention? And if it's brokered, by the way, what causes a brokered convention? Don, will you explain what would we did show those numbers a little while ago about how they're fractured. Explain to us in detail about how that fracturing is going to work out.
Well, each state has different rules on how they apportion delegates. So we've had Iowa, Wyoming, and New Hampshire have already taken place. And each state decides how they allocate delegates, but they are based largely on the popular vote. In Iowa, I don't know if you have the totals here somewhere, but there's already a delegate count that's already being tabulated, and it's based on how well the candidates do in the popular vote in their state.
That's right, and one of the things that's interesting is I do have those delegate counts, but these big news organizations can't even agree on that. I mean, you got CNN saying